Mike Tomlin talked a lot about tenor today. That seemed to
Tenor.
be last week's word of the day was behoove. Today's word of the day, I think, was tenor, which I already wrote about. You can check it out at DKPittsburghSports.com. A good Tuesday afternoon, everybody. A Tomlin Tuesday for those members of Steeler Nation. My name is Corey Chris, and of course, joined by Chris Halicke. This is the Southside Beat.
How am I coming up with this nickname of being a fortune teller?
You said yesterday.
Even though I could have said that the Rangers were going to beat the Astros in 7 games. So
cashed in a couple over bets in the process, did I? So happy about that. And NLC, a lot of good sports happening right now, Chris. NLCS Game 7 tonight. Of course, NFL's in full swing. My Cleveland Cavaliers tip off the season this week. Let's go, Cavs. If we could root for a Cleveland team in this city, that's the one. I love the NBA. I can't wait for that. Of course, college hoops right around the corner, and college football in full swing. So
October is always the best. October and March really are two of the best times of the year for sure. But I think October is definitely there just because of all the different things that you have going on. Like for real, you have baseball playoffs, NFL season's in full swing, like all the other things you just mentioned, man. Hockey's going on. Penn Stars tonight. That's going to be fun. I've got Stars fans that I'm friends with that I play hockey with that are already talking mess with me because, I'm the Pittsburgh guy, and so they're messing with me. So
all 32 teams are playing today, and I will be at the Penguins game as a fan. I'm not working. I believe Taylor and DK will be on that for you, but I will be casual observer today. It might be the day before a certain someone's birthday too, so I'm going to treat myself a little bit. But we'll get into that, obviously, on the Penguins channel, if we will. But let's talk about the football. Yes, it does, Barber. Yeah. I see your purple and gold with the Lakers. My Cavaliers, I'm excited. Let's talk about the football team here in Pittsburgh, Chris. And, of course, as is the custom on a Tuesday. Tenor was the word of the day, as we mentioned at the top. Mike Tomlin, of course, addressed the media in his weekly press conference today. A much different tone press conference than in previous weeks, I would say. And, of course, the tone changes after a win, as it always does.
Always.
And Mike Tomlin, to me, there were a lot of interesting things said. And I think today was a really big day in terms of peeling back the curtain. For Mike Tomlin. And I wrote about it. You can read about it already on DKPittsburghSports.com. It's at the top of the site as we speak. He talked about the game within the game, so to speak, and having to adjust to officiating. And, of course, he didn't call out officials. And, of course, his players made some really stupid penalties that would get called anywhere.
Very true.
But I think it was really interesting today what he had to say about learning. The word was tenor that he used, which means basically just tone. How are the referees going to call this game?
Yeah.
And I equated it, I immediately thought, well, in basketball, a referee might call touchier fouls or let them play. In baseball, an umpire might have a narrow strike zone, a wide strike zone. He might eject the guy for saying something out of the dugout on the spot. You just don't know.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, the Steelers had a season-high 8 penalties on Sunday that ultimately did not cost them in terms of a win or a loss. But I thought it was interesting that Mike Tomlin acknowledged that there was an adjustment to be made in the, so to speak, the game within the game. And that's the one thing he was really critical about from Sunday.
Well, and that honestly just goes, and some people may not like to hear this, but I'm going to say it anyway. That just goes to show you that Mike Tomlin is a good coach. He just is. Those are things that that coaches have to try to instill in his players. And you got to remember, you may look at what George Pickens did and what Deontay did and like some of the other players. These are all still young players. Like they're not seasoned vets. The number of what you would call seasoned veterans, it's very small on this team. This is still a young football team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Now, these players need to be smarter. And, you can talk about how Mike Tomlin might need to have them a little bit more prepared for those things. But those are things that they have. And George Pickens kind of even talked about it as like I've never really had a team come at me like that before in terms of how they were talking to him in the middle of a game. And so there are a number of games within the game. How the opponent is trying to get inside your head. How is the referee? How is the officiating crew calling certain things? How are they handling certain things? How are they talking? There's a number of different things. Those are things that players are just going to have to learn with over time. But it's Mike Tomlin's job to make sure that those guys are focused in on those things, on top of all of the, oh yeah, by the way, we have an actual game plan we have to execute as well.
Another big thing, I think, this is thematic. Mike Tomlin tends to speak in thematic on his press conference, right? If he gets hot on one thing, he's going to transition it into another thing. And of course, a lot of talk today also came down about Kenny Pickett. And he's magic in the fourth quarter. All the fourth quarter comebacks he's had so far in his career, he's up to 5 now. And basically the TLDR of, why can Kenny Pickett do this in the fourth, but not the first quarter? And which was a question I think you and I and the rest of the asylum here on the live stream had to ask out loud as well. Why can't Kenny do this in the first quarter or the second quarter, but he's able to really just kick it into gear in the fourth? And I liked Mike Tomlin's discourse and his transparency about how early game things are meant to feel out the opponent. There is a process when all of that, and it's a balancing act, so to speak, of game plan, what the Steelers want to do, and what they want to try to execute on offense early to set the tone. And then there's finding out information about the opponent. And Mike Tomlin really went into that today about how the Steelers used the word was script. And when you think of script, you think, oh, they're going to just run this play, then they're going to run this play, then they're going to run this play. Sometimes it's true. And the Steelers will take an opening drive, maybe 2, to run the plays they literally want to play in order to establish something on offense.
Yep.
But the flip side of it, which Mike Tomlin went into a lot of detail about today, was about how the Steelers are going to show certain things and they're going to see how the Rams react to it. And he admitted today that the Rams showed things on the field on Sunday they hadn't seen on tape. So I think that was a really interesting peeling back the curtain, so to speak, that Mike Tomlin gave in a lot of different ways. Just about gamesmanship and about obviously the game within the game, so to speak, as I mentioned earlier.
Yep. Comment here from Pete says Deontay realized what he done immediately, so I'm not worried about him going forward, which will filter through GP, George Pickens. I do believe that. Honestly, I don't think Deontay does that if it's anybody else not named Ahkello Witherspoon.
That's correct. And Deontay mentioned that himself.
Yeah. So I really don't. Now, granted, he still shouldn't do it, but him and Ahkello used to be teammates. They used to go up against each other all the time in practice. There's history there just between those two, not bad blood or anything like that, but just, from being on the same football team, you play against each other more often than you play against anyone else because, of all the practice there is. But
yes, Robert, the Steelers therapy session does start at 3 every day. That is partially what we're here for, I suppose. Lotion brings this up. Why did Deontay's taunting penalty offset with Witherspoon's PI? Fantastic question. And Mike Tomlin did address that today, because it was not ruled as a dead ball foul. And Mike Tomlin asked the white hat or the lead official for an explanation on that. Didn't really get one, but he got one from, I think he said a side judge or one of the, ancillary referees. And basically that official told Mike Tomlin that it was a continuation of the play. So that's why the penalty's offset, and it wasn't a dead ball foul, and it wasn't going to tack on after the fact.
Yeah, I think if it's a situation where Deontay is like almost all the way back at his huddle, and then he starts taunting him, and then he's flagged for it, I think that's considered okay. It's a dead ball foul. The play's been over for several seconds. The fact that Deontay immediately got up and did it to Ahkello, I didn't have any issue with it live. I didn't. Of all the different issues that I had with the officiating on Sunday, which to be honest, like I've seen football games way worse when it comes to the officiating. So I really didn't have that big of an issue. I didn't even think twice about it. Right. The two really, really kind of most egregious things that stood out to me were obviously the really horrible spot on Kenny's sneak. And then it did not look like TJ's helmet was in the neutral zone, but I digress.
That's another thing Tomlin brought up today too, on a, I guess, less flagrant scale. was, TJ was lined up, perhaps a judgment call, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps, but he did mention that officials will say, hey, TJ's a little too close, or he's starting to get a little too close. Those kind of things are discussed between referees and head coaches and even players. I mean, players will get these little tidbits from officials as well, like, hey, if you do that again, I'm going to call it. I mean, this happens in every sport. Predominantly, I think hockey and basketball. In basketball,
baseball too. I mean,
baseball as well. It happens everywhere. But I think of basketball being on the floor in basketball. Hey, if you throw anything like that again, or if you make that motion again, I'm calling it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I think, what happened here with TJ. Now, the Pickens crackback on the Johnson reception, you can't do. It's inexcusable. It gets called everywhere.
That's a very, very explicit no. I mean, if he just kind of runs over and kind of nonchalantly stands in his way and doesn't attempt to make any contact whatsoever, that's the way you do it nowadays. That's the way you have to do it. Just kind of get in his way a little bit to slow him down, and that's all you have to do. If you throw or lean the shoulder at all, it's going to be a penalty 100% of the time, because your momentum with your shoulder is going back towards your sideline, which is the exact language of the rule. You just can't do it.
Correct.
It doesn't mean it's a dirty play. But it is explicitly 100% against the rules.
And then here's the thing: the referees don't know, or probably don't care to know, to be honest, is that Johnson and Witherspoon were teammates here in Pittsburgh. Yeah. So they're just seeing wide receiver taunting cornerback.
Yep.
They don't consider they were teammates for X amount of years and have practiced against each other for X amount of years and X amount of times. They just don't consider all of that stuff. So
nor should they, honestly.
Correct. And that's not their job.
Nope.
That's not their job. Their job is to enforce the rules. So they're not thinking, well, yeah, we know 44 and 18 former teammates. They might have a little thing. And Johnson, to kind of put him down on this one, you have to think of the moment. You have to think of where you are in the game. That led to that spot on Kenny, which 50-50 call. It goes the Steelers' way. But if Kenny doesn't get that spot, they turn the ball over, and then for whatever reason the Rams win the game and the Steelers lose, you're going to look at that Johnson penalty and say, well, that was the most bonehead thing I've seen since the Claypool era. I mean, I don't know. You could point to any, I guess, recent Steelers receiver that's no longer here. So
that's bad. Says shushing is taunting, flexing is not. Taunting is whatever the referee deems as taunting. I mean, if we're being 100% honest, I mean, if the referee feels like one player is taunting another one, they'll throw the flag.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what the
Robert says, Mike Tomlin says no update on Cam. Yes, he did say that. To jump into injuries real quick, no update on Cam Hayward and a potential of where he could return. Now, the initial reports after week 1 were to think he would be out a couple of months, potentially a week 10 return. So we'd still be a few weeks out from that. Yep. But Mike Tomlin had no update on Cam Hayward. He mentioned Cole Holcomb is being evaluated. I believe it was an ankle issue. And to put it into paraphrasing, day-to-day on that. And then Anthony McFarland is still being looked at for his knee. Now, on Saturday, last Monday, the Steelers opened the window for Deontay Johnson and Anthony McFarland at the time. So they still have a couple of weeks to designate Anthony McFarland to return off of IR. They had not done that prior to the Saturday deadline, to activate him, put him on the 53 and so forth, which is, partially why you saw Godwin, Igwebuike take kick returns, but I think he might stick around for that anyway. So those are the injuries. Nothing too major right now, other than, of course, Pat Freiermuth landing on IR. And I think now would be a good time to talk about that, Chris, because the tight ends weren't used a lot on Sunday. And we talked about that a little bit yesterday about how, well, they didn't really impact the game, so to speak, but they didn't blow the game for the Steelers either. And not having Pat Freiermuth on the field just simply changes the offense. It's losing a complete tight end. It's losing probably your third best pass catching weapon behind Johnson and Pickens. And this is going to be something the Steelers have to deal with for at least 3 more games up to this point.
Yeah. Man. Hold on. I was just reading one comment and then By the way, Crystal, real quick, let's talk about the Jags. We will definitely be getting into the Jaguars plenty this week. So I have had time to review, and Steelers Freak says I have had time to review, or have I had time to review the tape? I've had time to review so pretty much I watch the tape primarily for what produces content. So my Chalk Talk piece, which is on DKPittsburghSports.com right now, that focuses on the red zone and the perfect 3 for 3 that they had. Some of the things that stood out to me from watching that. Actually, a lot of the tape that I've been watching today has been more on the Jaguars side, trying to get ready because I have a team preview of them coming out here soon. So, yeah, that'll be the next piece that I'm kind of looking at. That's not as deep into the film as it is kind of a look at the film plus the data, just so you guys can get a deeper look at the Jaguars heading into Sunday. So we'll definitely have plenty of time to talk about the Jaguars this week for sure. Totally derailed. What was the last thing that you were mentioning, Corey?
Tight ends. Not having Pat Freiermuth for at least 3 more weeks.
Yeah. So tight ends, like, they didn't have like this standout game, but when it came down to it, they did their job for the most part. They did what they were asked to do, and what they were asked to do primarily was block really well in the running game. Run efficient routes. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be, the first or the second read, as long as they're running their routes and doing what they need, doing what's asked of them. And for the most part, they did. And Connor Hayward, props to him, executed that one play action pass, really well, came over, faked the block, moved back over, had plenty of room because the play action sold so well, and had a really nice catch and run that nearly found pay dirt. So, I mean, if the tight ends execute what's asked of them, and pretty much if the players execute what's asked of them, we're going to see better results more often. It doesn't mean that this offense is going to turn into a juggernaut. I don't think the offense is built to be a juggernaut or designed to be a juggernaut. But if the players execute what's asked of them more often than not, it should be a productive offense. And I'm using the term productive kind of my own way, productive for what it's designed to be. And so I had no issues with what the tight ends did on Sunday, honestly, because you're not going to ask any of them to be Pat Freiermuth. You shouldn't. And you play to each one of their strengths, what each one of them does well. So I had no issues with what the tight ends did. And that's what they should be doing while Pat's out. They shouldn't be trying to do things that they can't do.
The Pro Football Focus grades and charts and all that stuff came out, of course, yesterday. And just from looking at snap counts, 58 offensive snaps for the Steelers, 50 for Connor Hayward, 30 for Darnell Washington, and 11 for Hot Rod, Rodney Williams. So, yes, Connor Hayward did take on the Pat Freiermuth role. He was the unquestioned tight end 1 in that offense. And I think Matt Canada did a good job of scheming around not having Pat Freiermuth. I remember yesterday somebody asked about not having Calvin Austin on the field, and I think that's part of a product of not having Pat Freiermuth on the field. You can mix and match when you have Pat Freiermuth on the field. You could do a little bit more when you have Pat Freiermuth on the field. When you have Connor Hayward on the field, he's more of a fullback. He's more of a blocker. He's more of a short, throw passes behind the line of scrimmage kind of guy. One of the big plays of the game on Sunday was that play to Hayward off play action that set up a touchdown. So they used the tight ends in a fair manner given the circumstance. And yeah, the Steelers might be trying out another tight end today, as Robert points out, but I don't know what good it's going to do. It's probably just for practice squad, if anything, because now they know that Freiermuth isn't going to be there for 3 weeks at least.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of just business as usual. One guy goes on IR, you've got to find everybody else who was, behind him on the depth chart has to move up. So now Rodney Williams, instead of being a practice squad guy, is going to turn into the number 3 tight end. And so, helps to bring in another guy, to fill in on the practice squad. So, when it comes to the receivers, though, I think like Allen Robinson is getting those snaps right now because he's the primary slot guy. Now, I think Calvin Austin could operate really well out of the slot. But so far, the Steelers have primarily used him on the outside. Now, I think maybe that's just a product of his speed. And that might be the main reason why. But as of right now, Allen Robinson is the primary slot guy. I think whenever they want to run 3 receiver sets and have either Deontay or George line up in the slot, that's the time to bring Calvin Austin in, to have him be on the outside if either Deontay or George are lined up in the slot for a play. But that's just the main reason why Allen Robinson is getting way more snaps than Calvin Austin right now, is because, despite his deficiencies that he does have, Allen Robinson at least knows how to find, especially against defenses that run zone coverage predominantly. He knows how to find soft spots in zone, and that anytime you can give Kenny a wide open target almost every time, that'll help.
I like this question from Jerry. 24 to 30 points should be enough to win any game, but it needs to be over 4 quarters. I'll take 1 though. Whatever results in a win, obviously. Yeah. But I believe league average, and I'd have to go back and look at this, is around 24 to 25 points that gets scored.
I'm pulling up the numbers right now.
So
I'm trying to.
But here's the thing about that, Jerry, is the Steelers haven't scored 23, 24 points on a consistent basis. Yeah. And yet, since the last year's bye week, they are 11-4. In some odd fashion, they are 11-4. Real quick, by the way, because Chris mentioned snap counts for offense. I want to mention snap counts for defense real quick. Now, the Steelers played 68 plays on defense. Minka played all of them. Pat P was only absent for 1. But check this out. Joey Porter Jr., 53 out of 68 snaps. Levi Wallace, 49 out of 68. So the Steelers are working in Joey Porter Jr. more. And aside from TJ Watt, Porter had the best coverage grade of any Steeler defender. I believe maybe Landon Roberts was right near, or he might have just been better than Porter. But the snap counts for Joey Porter Jr. are going up, and I don't think it's any secret that aside from Puka Nacua, the Rams really couldn't get anything going in their passing game.
Yep. Just to let everybody know, 24 points a game right now would rank 11th in the NFL. 30 points a game would rank 2nd. So 25 points a game would rank 8th.
Okay.
So if you kind of want to get a barometer of how many points the Steelers should ideally need to score per game to have a really good shot of winning, I would just aim for 25 a game. 24 a game might be good enough if the defense plays well enough, but 25, 26 a game. But that's a tall order, because I don't think this offense is really built to be able to score that much that often. This is an offense and hasn't, put up more than 400 or at least 400 yards in 54 games.
Right.
So, and only scored, I think, 30 points, once last year. So
correct. Randy asks, this is a Journo Biz question here, which I always am down to answer. Randy says, Tomlin answered the way we wanted him to, not concentrating beyond the next game. This is, of course, a question reflecting next Thursday, which the Steelers versus the Titans on Thursday Night Football. So question was, basically, I'll paraphrase it, about you have a Sunday game and then you have a Thursday game. How do you keep them focused on Sunday? And Mike Tomlin, as he does, says, I'm only focused on Sunday, and kind of shut the question down. And Randy asks, how does a journalist protect his pride by getting shut down? Sometimes you can't really have pride in these situations.
No.
Now, I don't think the question was a bad one to ask, because there's legitimate, you have 2 games within the span of 4 days or 5 days or whatever it is. You got to kind of flip the switch quickly. How do you not look ahead? How do you stay prepared for Sunday? So I understand it. Yeah, it goes into my room and hit my punching. I go punch a pillow. Darn, let me tell you what, if you go back and watch some of the Latrobe press conferences out in training camp, I got bodied quite a bit by Mike Tomlin. And so Chris knows this. You take your lumps where you get them. They will happen. It's almost like a stand-up comedian trying to give a stand-up routine. Sometimes you will bomb. Sometimes the question you ask Mike Tomlin or whoever it is will bomb emphatically. And guess what you have to do? You have to just sit there and eat it and move on. It happens. It happens to everybody. It's not just me. It's not just that reporter that asked the question today. It happens to legitimately everybody.
I don't know. Mike says, don't take it out on your Blue Jays.
They're safe and sound. You don't have to call any animal activists over here. They are safe and sound on the wall.
It really is something, and I think Corey can attest to this, and I know DK can attest to this, and I can attest to this because we've all covered multiple teams, some of us at the same time. It really is kind of another thing is you really have to kind of learn your audience when you're asking questions.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, you can't ask questions the same way between Mike Tomlin as you do, for you, Pat Narduzzi, or for me, whenever I went and covered Pirates and I was asking Derek Shelton a question. It was just two entirely different types of conversations. I've covered, certain coaches or managers. I feel like I could ask any question at all in any way, any form whatsoever, and almost treat it as if we were like asking a buddy a question, like if we were sitting at a bar drinking. Like Chris Woodward, whenever he was manager of the Rangers, was like that. When I was on that beat, he was just he was a conversation type of guy. So you could ask questions as if you were just having a regular old conversation. Mike Tomlin's not like that whatsoever. You've got to find the right way to ask the questions because he is a maestro behind the podium. He will absolutely. Yeah. By the way, if I look really dark, I'm about to go turn on like some lights in my house because apparently we've got like a tornado or something hanging over the house that just darkened everything. So I'll be right back.
You're turning into a weather reporter here. Oh my goodness. Chris is going to go turn a light on if he has power. He does have power, else he wouldn't be able to do this. Ryan asks, were you intimidated by Mike Tomlin the first time? I'll admit, the first time you good?
Yeah. That was just crazy. Like, because I've got a really big window open over there, got a window open over here. There's a lot of natural light that comes in my house, which is one of the things that I love about my house. But, when these Texas storms come through and stuff like that, and then anybody who's lived in Texas and understands what Texas storms are like, they can look like, okay, I'm about to die. All right. It was nice knowing everybody, hope I lived a good life because I'm going to die. And then they last for 10 minutes and then they're over. But for those 10 minutes, it's like like my whole house got dark.
You might be able to see it in the reflection of my glasses, but I do have a ring light on. There's a light. There's the actual overhead.
I usually don't have to. For this entire time shooting the show, I have never had to use a light because I have so much natural light in my house. Because, if you have enough natural light that,
Right. All right. So back to this.
And, no, I do not want to imagine that.
Well, hold on. Where's the question at? Were you intimidated by Mike Tomlin? Ryan asks. Now, I have a different approach of doing this, and I kind of approach every new beat like this. I try not to go in guns a-blazing, if that makes sense. So I'll admit, and Chris was there with me last year when I started sitting in on Tomlin press conferences and going to the locker room and everything. When you're new, the new kid on the beat, the new kid on the block, you have to kind of feel it out. You have to be able to read the room, as Steelers Freak here says. You have to be able to read the room. You have to be able to know, is Mike Tomlin going to respond to this way, or is he going to respond to this that way? Mm-hmm. So I can't tell you the first question I ever asked Mike Tomlin because it probably was several press conferences into me actually going there. Mm-hmm. And Chris obviously went through under something like this, and maybe he found the perfect time to ask his first question to Mike Tomlin. And I couldn't tell you what my first question ever to Mike Tomlin was, but I can tell you that in Latrobe, on more than one occasion in training camp, I absolutely bombed on 3 questions in a row. Happens. And I got a pep talk, actual pep talk from a fellow reporter on the beat that was like, it was a good question. You're fine. Just stay with it. It's okay. Yeah. Because it happens. You have to know your audience. You have to read the room. You have to be able to get a feel for it. I covered Jim Boeheim. Okay. Those that know college basketball know who Jim Boeheim is. As cantankerous as it gets. And that is the perfect adjective for Jim Boeheim. Cantankerous. Yeah. $5 word I just used right there. If you don't come correct to Jim Boeheim, it's off the rails. It's over for you. You will get it on the spot.
Yeah. And the thing is that Mike Tomlin will be a little different depending on his like the setting that he's in as well. I can attest to this from being at the owners meetings. Whenever we go to the owners meetings once a year, which usually take place sometime in March, or I think at the end of March, I don't know, sometime between the combine and the draft. We go there, and there's only a handful of reporters that ever go. And he sits down like at a table, like at a restaurant at the whatever the resort or wherever the owners meeting is going to be held at, and he kind of sits, and it's a round table discussion type thing. Now, this past year, he was still a little bit more I'm Mike Tomlin behind the podium about it, but he wasn't nearly as what you see on Tuesdays when you're watching live as he was when he's sitting at that round table. So it's and I'm not, by the way, if you're talking about the round table that was aired on like NFL Network or anything like that, that's not the round table I'm talking about. This thing was not filmed on video or anything like that. He does his own separate one with just the local reporters. So it is different depending on his setting. And so you kind of have to learn how to ask questions in certain, even depending on the type of setting you're in, because if it's a formal press conference, you've got to ask questions a certain way. If it's more like, oh, I'm covering baseball and I'm meeting in the manager's office, or we're having a conversation pregame in the dugout, it's different than whenever he's sitting up on behind a podium after a win or a loss. Whenever he's doing his postgame press conference, it's just different. You have to adapt to your surroundings and your settings.
A couple other perfect examples on my end from Pitt. Pat Narduzzi, every Thursday, he gives 2 press conferences a week. Imagine if Mike Tomlin did that. Pat Narduzzi gives 2 press conferences a week on record. One is the typical at the lectern on Mondays. And then every Thursday on the South Side, he'll take what is basically a round table. He'll sit in the middle of one of these big, long conference tables, and the reporters will be surrounding him, and we'll just ask questions about the upcoming game or whatever it is. And that setting is usually more relaxed than the Monday buttoned up, we just got our butts kicked by Wake Forest, or we just beat Louisville press conference. And then Jeff Capel covering Pitt basketball last year. Jeff Capel tends to take a stoic approach at these press conferences. But once Pitt started winning, number one, and then number two, when Pitt got to the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament, you get to spend a little more time with these guys behind the scenes. And that's when I really got to know Jeff Capel a little bit more. Now, we didn't hang out or, go out and have a good time around town or anything because they were still working. But like when you're behind the scenes and the locker rooms are open and you're seeing all the coaches and everything, you get to know them a little bit better. There was a time we were in Dayton, and this was right before Pitt tipped off in the NCAA tournament, and Capel comes up to me. He's like, Corey, I'm like, what's up? He goes, I didn't know you were a Syracuse guy because I graduated from there. And I'm like, yeah, started talking about going there because he's a Duke guy, so rivals, and we started having a little rapport on that. And then I think after that conversation and like getting to know each other a little bit more, things became more relaxed. And maybe I got a little more leniency if I did ask him a dumb question after the fact. So yes, the reporter relationship with the coach or with whoever it is that's given the press conference or the interview, that does come into play at some point as well.
For sure.
All right. On a Tomlin Tuesday, Chris, good stuff today. A lot of really good topics.
Yeah.
Peeling back the curtain, so to speak. Tomorrow, we will have player access on the South Side for the first time this week. It should be a Kenny Wednesday, so Kenny Pickett should be usually does talk on Wednesdays rather. So we're expecting that. Of course, the coordinators on Thursdays. I will be either low quality or no quality, Corey, tomorrow and Thursday, depending on how nice the South Side internet wants to be to me. Friday is going to be Chris solo because I will be traveling to South Bend, Indiana.
We'll do it again
for Pitt Notre Dame. So that's kind of how this week looks. But Chris and I will be back tomorrow, of course, as we are 3 to 3:30 here. Well, Chris will be here. We'll see if I am. I will try to be here.
We will. I think last Thursday, for the most part, minus the internet just having impeccable timing and cutting off your prediction right at the right time. I think if we can get set up in the normal spot, I think we'd be all right for Wednesday and Thursday. If it means that I start solo so that Corey has some extra time to get done what he needs to get done, that's fine too. We can do that.
Yeah, so full transparency before we go, the Wednesday and Thursday situations are really difficult, and we try to do it as best we can because we tried to plan this show obviously before DK and Ramon go on air.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, that in mind, going at 3:00 made the most sense, and that was all determined before the Steelers put any sort of media schedules out for the season. Now, those go on a week-to-week basis. So we find out literally Sunday if Monday locker room is going to be open and then what happens Wednesday through Friday. And at the time we decided the show's going to proceed Ramon and DK and everything's going to start at 3:00. We didn't know that the Steelers locker room would be open from 2 to 3:00 on the south side.
Yeah.
So with that said, the initial thought was, well, last year they went early. They tended to end by 2.
Yeah, I wanted to say locker room last year on the Wednesday and Thursday was like 2:15 to 2:45 or something like that. So I think we were kind of anticipating that, like, okay, 15 minutes is enough time,
right?
To, if there's an emergency thing that needs to go out, great, we can do that real quick and still go live at 3:00. So.
Right. So we've been trying to play with that. Obviously, with Kenny talking on Wednesdays, Cam Hayward being injured, he usually talks Thursdays, so he hasn't been doing that because he's on IR.
Right.
But once he gets back, that's obviously going to change. So we do the best we can with the circumstances we have. If the internet craps out on the south side sometimes, we can't help it. Quite honestly, it just kind of happens. Maybe I could start hotspotting or something like that.
By the way, that seems to be an NFL issue. By the way, so
really?
another pull, peel behind the curtain thing. I've been in, I don't know, I think now it would be double-digit NFL stadiums. I don't know. But I've been in several double-digit stadiums, and the Wi-Fi usually sucks, like in an NFL stadium. In some stadiums, it's really, really bad. I remember week 1 in Cincinnati last year; it was horrendous.
Yeah.
And they always tell you can't use your hotspot. It's like, well, then give me internet that works. Because
try covering college football in some of these cities, man.
so it's just funny because it's like the NFL, which is brings in the most amount of money in the world, and it's not close. Has some of the crappiest internet, or I don't know if it's the crappiest or not, but it's really terrible internet as compared to Major League Baseball, which granted is the second most highest grossing league in the world. I seldom ever had an issue, and I've definitely been in double-digit a number of ballparks.
Yeah,
seldom had issues with Wi-Fi, and MLB Wi-Fi is usually top-notch.
Pirates have a really good operation when it comes to the internet access.
Press dining is a different story.
Well, I enjoyed it when you do partake in it. I do enjoy it. The Steelers press dining, spot on, just absolutely gorgeous.
Pirates press dining is a little for $14. I better get some better food and definitely other options than broccoli.
Don't hate
every meal.
Don't hate on broccoli, bro. It's good.
I like broccoli, but every meal, it's like doesn't matter if it's barbecue or if it's pasta or if whatever it is. There's just always broccoli. It's like they have some sort of deal with a broccoli farmer or whatever. And
I'd love to hear your conspiracy theory about this at some different point.
I don't know.
I will say this: the spread at Wake Forest when I was there Saturday, underrated facility, by the way. The only 2 knocks I had were, number 1, there was no press conference room for Narduzzi, so we did it in the tunnel by the locker room. You could imagine how that went. Number 2, we got kicked out an hour after media access ended. Imagine an NFL stadium doing that. Not good. So I had to go write the rest of my story from my hotel, which if you watch that Pitt game, it was quite a story to write. Chris and I are out of here. We'll be back tomorrow on a Wednesday. But for now, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for liking, subscribing, sharing. Tell a friend to tell a friend. It goes a long way, as always. And remember, if you didn't catch us live, we're available on playback on youtube.com, DK Pittsburgh Sports Steelers. And then, of course, where podcasts are found. So Apple, Google Play, and Spotify. He's Chris. I'm Corey. This has been the Southside Beat. DK and Ramon in about 20 minutes. As for us, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.